So we have Ellen Cantro, Adrian Watts, Lori Childers, Izzy Stark, Julie Canopow, and Deanna D. Avila.
Yes.
So we are just going to talk a little bit about their inspiration behind the show and all sorts of good stuff. This is the kickoff to our centennial season, so we're very excited.
Woo!
Yes, thank you. And if you would just please join me in giving a big round of applause for these ladies. So we will be sharing our microphones tonight, but if you're close enough already, that's not a problem. So whoever wants to go first, please, by all means. I think it would be great for you to tell us a little bit about how this exhibition came about. What was the inspiration for highlighting these legacy artists from the Art Center's history, and maybe a little bit about your individual artists and what you learned about them.
I'll start that off. So we, as a collective, started talking about this idea about a year ago. We do have an exhibition committee, which Izzy serves on, and as a group we talk about ideas and kind of throw them out, bounce off those ideas with one another. So this came about, like I mentioned, about a year ago, in looking at ways that we can showcase our work, our ideas, and then really one big thing as a collective we'd like to do is connect with the community and find ways to some relatable aspect to the artist community, particularly locally. This is a perfect opportunity to merge with Arts Center Sarasota for the centennial. So we kind of pitched the idea, worked with you in hashing out the concept, and then worked with us as a collective who wanted to participate and who we would each kind of represent with our work. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, it just was really neat to work with this particular group. I think we're kind of like this interesting group of artists that are all multi-generational, come from different facets, different mediums. We all touch different areas of Sarasota, and I think that is what's so unique about the Sarasota art history. You know, there's just such a rich, unique blend of so many things, and I think we represent that. So it was really cool to create a body of work that held true to that and also mirrored, Sarasota. It was pretty cool.
Maybe you could each share a little bit of history about the artist you chose and maybe why.
Well, my artist is still living. My piece is in the corner, and I chose Carl Abbott, the architect. I was really drawn to the blue that Carl uses. If I needed one kind of thing that, when we talked about this exhibit, I create through synesthesia, so my senses cross. But when we were on a meeting talking about this exhibit and thinking about artists we would choose, the color blue came to me. And I knew who that belonged to, Carl Abbott, who does a lot of the modernist architecture in the area. My piece is specific to the Putterman House.
So my artist is Eldon Rowland. He was also an Ohio native, came to Florida early in his career to pursue the arts. He was born in 1915 and then passed in 1982. So really in light, I had not heard of this artist before, but I'm a huge fan of mid-century modern art. So when I saw his work, it just responded to me. Like I felt like it reflected my work as well, and particularly was interested in his transition, because his earlier works were much more representational, and he also saw still lifes to then full expression, expressionistic, abstract. So I could relate to that, kind of the many minds and worlds, I guess, of the artists and all the things we like to explore. So yeah, that was kind of an easy choice for me. I learned more about him after choosing him, but it just solidified my choice and kind of that personal relationship. So.
Yeah, and I chose Sid Solomon to kind of mirror his practice. His work stood out to me, not only with the bold use of color. I do a lot of that within my own work. I don't shy away from the bold usage of color, but his work and his practice was often a reaction to the environment around him. He found a lot of inspiration in Sarasota and the coastal regions of Florida, and that kind of fed his practice and his work. And I would say one of the main intentions behind what I do is a reaction to my own story and what I go through. And so mirroring that way of his way of approaching his own creative expression, I took that and I kind of found a kinship to how he creates. And so, yeah, I mean, just his own way of creating being a reaction and an expression of the environment around him, I think really mirrored what I do within my own personal expression.
I chose Victor Lundy, right here. He's an architect, lived 100 years. When the show came up, see around the table, instantly I was like, have to do Victor Lundy. I mean, my heart skips a beat when I look at his work. And so it was difficult to do. It was difficult to distill some of his ideas and concepts about shape and form, and had the opportunity to read closer. And I brought this beautiful book that shows a lot of his work. So, not articulating it very well. It was also very hard to do because I really love all his work. Churches, and it's just so many amazing pieces. And interesting, he's actually known for doing brutalist architecture, which has gotten a bad rap recently, and to find that so beautiful in that light is so interesting as well. But I encourage you to look at the book, and I bet you'll see some things and visit some of his still existing work around Sarasota. I was actually, one of the first times I knew of him, we went to his church. It was a funeral for a young boy that went to school, went to church actually with my son. And it was completely tragic. He fell asleep on the highway and died in the middle of the night. And the church was filled, of course, with people, and my son was there. It was incredible. And I walked in and I was like, wow, this is just incredible. And it turns out that was a Lundy church. But I can't get away from the memory as well. This is such an incredible time. And to be in his space, really beautiful picture of the book as well. Anyway, I'm going to pass it back.
The artist that I chose for my inspiration is Fred Colson. My piece is right here. It's called Contemplation. It's blue and black. And I did not have a particularly easy time of choosing an artist. It took me quite a while, but I came to the Art Center in Christina and I sat down and looked through the archives. And I think initially the work that I saw of his is his three-dimensional work, which is very bold and colorful, reds and golds, and it's all very primitive, inspired by his travels. He lived, I think, let's see, he was born in 1931 and passed away in 2015, and lived in 67 or 69 countries before he landed in Sarasota. So fascinating background. I had the great good fortune to meet his son, Sean, who lives here in Venice, and he was a wealth of information. But anyhow, he and his wife, Diana, bought a studio that Hilton Leach had previously painted in on Hillview Street. And the work that inspired my piece is actually his masks. They are ceramic and molded ceramic masks. They're about a foot in square. And the piece that inspired mine is 5 rows and 16 columns. So it's 5 feet by 16 feet, and it sat in front of his Hillview Street studio for years. I think he was there for 50 years or something. And anyhow, it's a very graphic and bold work, and it just drew me in right away. The work that I typically make is large-scale abstracts that are woven. I paint 2 canvases and weave them together. So I think it was the presentation of the masks as a mural in those squares that really drew me in. And that's how I ended up with Frank Colson as my inspiration artist.
This is on. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I'm Ellen. Those 2 colorful 3-dimensional pieces are mine. The artist I chose is John Chamberlain, who's actually a sculptor, and I believe his son lives in Sarasota now. He died in 2011. And the inspiration for this one, I was looking for painters because that's what I typically do. I don't usually do 3-dimensional work. But he took crushed cars and made sculptures out of them. And as soon as I saw his work, I knew exactly what I was going to do. They were tactile, they were whimsical, they were, a lot of distress and rust, which are my favorite things. And so I took all kinds of stuff in my studio and made things and just crumpled them up and tried to recreate the feeling that I got from looking at those sculptures. I'm very happy with them, and they were just a very odd shape too. So the first one was the first one. I did about 6 for the show, but we only had space for this many. So the first one on the left is the first one I did, and this was the last one. And I think those are the 2 best. So yeah, I never thought I would take a 3-dimensional sculpture as an inspiration, but and as far as being part of the show, I've been a member for 7 years since I've been in Sarasota. I didn't realize it was 100 years old, so when this came up, I was like, that's very cool. And then researching it, it was just very nice to be looking at all the artists that were not in Sarasota for a long time. So very excited about being in the show.
That's great. So you mentioned, Ellen, and a number of you, that actually your artists of inspiration did totally different mediums from you, be it architecture, ceramics, sculpture. So for those of you that did something different from your normal, how did you approach that, and what did you learn in that translation process?
I never know what I'm going to paint because I do abstracts. I've never known what I'm going to paint until it's finished. With these, I knew exactly what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And it was a lot of fun because there were no rules. Like, okay, this is completely different. I've got nothing to lose. If it works, great. I also started months in advance. We had enough time, so I was able to do multiples until I got the ones that I liked. But creating these was just so different. It wasn't painting. I mean, there are paintings on there that I then repurposed, which is like what he did with the cars. Cars, they were crushed and they became something else. So I took a lot of different elements laying around my studio, things I created, and repurposed them. And that's actually a kitchen cabinet. I had renovated my kitchen a couple of years ago, and I saved all the extra pieces, so it was like had a frame built in. So I put it in there. So I definitely cheated on it. It worked.
So for me, I'm a large-scale abstract painter. It's kind of wild and free, so doing something like this is kind of representational for me. Frank Colson's masks, he was inspired by primitive artists in all these countries that he lived in and traveled to, and they really did have that, I don't want to say simple, but just a real basic, calm, quiet quality to them, and that really inspired me as a meditator myself to do something contemplative and peaceful. So that was how I worked with it. The woven part of the work, I actually, typically when I paint, do 2 different canvases and then weed them when they're ready. This was the opposite. I made the squares first for the most part with a background and then painted and tied them together with those circles. The piece that I used as an inspiration had hands and faces, the masks, and the hands looked like they crossed borders between the squares. It was very cool, but I used the circles for that to tie the different components of the painting together.
For my particular exploration, when I typically begin the creative process, a lot of what I do starts with an initial thought, and I'm typically grounded in a lot of realism and representational kind of expression. And Sid's work is almost 6 steps further, right? It's expressive, it's abstract, right? But when I'm creating, I start with an initial thought and an initial image, and it starts to intuitively expand on either canvas or paper. And I saw that I could translate what he does with abstract expressionism with his intuitive practice, right? So in the ways that my typical vein of creating kind of expands on a canvas, I found that his work, when it was expressive and abstract, it's like you don't quite know what you're gonna get by the end of it. And when I approach something, even in representationalism, I don't know what I'm gonna get till the end of it, but I know what I want to start with, right? And so I found that there's a lot of connecting threads between what he does and what I do. It's just 6 steps further, I think, down the line.
So a lot of my paintings are objects, object paintings placed in a painted, abstract painted space. So an architect has these objects on a giant scale in a space, so to speak. And so for me, I did several paintings. I thought I was going to do a whole bunch of like 3 smaller ones, so I would be able to do the church and do this and try different things, and nothing was working because I was so overcome with having a crush on this architect and all his work. And this is a smart man, went to Yale, really, really amazing work, and trying to take it from architecture onto a painting. There was a lot of distillation that had to happen. So there were smaller pieces that weren't successful enough, and I really feel actually I barely pulled this off. Barely is okay, but I did in the end, it does have a sense of that mid-century feel. Not that I wasn't trying for that, but in a sense, I feel like that's what it communicates that. So I'm going to call that a success. But it was hard taking and looking at such a full body of work. There was something in Houston I liked, something, and of course I wanted to stay in Sarasota, but I just kept getting distracted by these other shapes and lines and places. And I'll just add one little thing that I think during that time I started to do some small series in my studio, and there's lamps, abstract interior spaces, and there's this blue lamp piece, and I kept imagining that it was somehow at night in his house studio in Houston. It just kept coming back to me, and it kind of has a sense for me and a feeling, and it's always a separate piece.
I was thinking about this, because initially I thought, oh, well, I do paintings, I've done paintings for a long time. Probably the last 10 years or so, I primarily worked digitally, so this was an opportunity to go back to my first love, which is painting. I didn't mention my still on the end with the cactus. What was unusual for me with this piece is that I used photo reference, which I never, ever do, ever. I am all about observational painting and drawing, and I teach full-time at Grayling as a professor, and I teach drawing, and so I preach the importance of learning how to observe and then translate with our own eyes. But this work was all inspired off my vacation out west to Joshua Tree over the summer. So I can't be there, all the time, so I was forced to use my photo reference. So that was interesting because at some point you do have to leave the idea. I also worked abstract primarily with kind of knowing it's a process-oriented thing, so this was different, that I did have an idea and intention initially, but really letting go of like when you let go of the photo reference and then let it become its own thing. So that was a fun experience, and continuing that process in a new series now, so that's great.
I'm a digital artist who works with pixels in the cloud. So when I was thinking of the substrate, which I used 1-inch thick acrylic blocks, 10 by 10s. I wanted something to as closely match an architectural form as I could imagine. I don't have cement, I don't work with cement, but could I work with a window or something that we could look through? So that's how I approached the acrylic. When I looked at Carl's work, specifically the Putterman House, I was looking at some of the cantilevers, how he has hanging portions of his houses. I was looking at the stairwells, and I just kept seeing tessellations, triangles. And so you can see a lot of different geometry within my artwork, that different piece. But yeah, the blue, Carl's blue, will forever be.
Carl loves that blue. Well, I think that's great. I mean, that's such a testament of you all as artists translating a different material into your own, and great job on that. So all of you have taken inspiration from male artists, and you are all women. So how was that challenge, or was it a challenge, to put your own female perspective into their inspiration?
There was absolutely none. Until you asked that question, I had never given it any thought. So I would have to say it had absolutely no bearing on my work or my interpretation. I always like cars though, but I don't think that's what male female is.
I'm gonna pipe in with Del in there and say that didn't bother me at all. I tend to be, I think, inspired by a lot of masculine artistic concepts. That geometry doesn't look very feminine, if feminine has a voice in that way. So no, I didn't even think about that.
I didn't either, but I did think it was an interesting question, and it did make me just reflect on many instances I've had where people have said, oh, you didn't do that work, that was done by a man, I'm sure of it. I've actually had this happen. I was teaching a workshop like maybe 5 years ago or something, and I referenced the work I created at the Brigham College Library, and someone said, oh no, a man did that. And I was like, no, I'm sure it was me, but it's just interesting. It's so interesting though how your work can be perceived to be gender biased, but for me personally, when I enter the creative space, I don't really lean towards, femininity or masculinity. I'm just kind of tapping into something that is just very true and not really leaning towards like a gender. So.
As a younger artist, right, I'm kind of stepping into what today's art world looks like, right? And I think it's kind of neat to have all of us sitting here looking at male artists and setting this tone now that, there is no gender, right, in terms of that expression. And it does not need to be mandated as such. And so, I think we all can agree that we didn't really think of it at the time, right? We were just looking at things that interested us, and I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think when we started out, I got this instinct because I just had a crush on this architect. So, art crushes are, fun, right? So it's just instant, but when we looked at it as a whole, and we did talk about it, and we noticed that, gee, but, unfortunately, let's be real. When we thought about the ones that we liked, who were popular, who were top of mind, they're all men, right? So that's real. Let's just be real. And somewhere. So, I don't know, I think we just have to be real about it, and I don't think it affected us while we were working.
For me, I actually started out looking for a female artist as inspiration and really fell in love with this work when I saw it. I don't know that the fact that Coulson is a man really affected my interpretation, other than once I finished, and all my sketches for this, there were male faces and female faces, and when I look at them after I finished, they primarily looked female to me, so I thought that was interesting, but it really wasn't part of my thought process. So, interesting point though.
Well, I mean, I wasn't assuming that it was a big part of your influence, but it is notable, and I think, to your point, Lori, like, it's reality, and that, I'm glad you ladies are changing that reality, so that's great. In terms of being part of this artist collective, how does that support your studio practice? What inspiration or, giddy ups do you guys give each other?
I think it's just pretty special that we get to meet and talk shop and kind of grow and learn from each other. It's more of a casual conversation, but it's amazing. I mean, I sparked a dialogue with Julie this past week that has really helped me along my way, and I think it's just important to have that support. And also, I mean, the group is predominantly women, so to that point, right? I think it's also really interesting to have dialogues of that intersection between femininity, feminine voices, and artistic expression.
One thing, we certainly do have some accountability as a group because, well, we just have deadlines, right? And we have another show coming in January, and so we'll be meeting tomorrow and checking in and see where things are. But my feeling is very much what Izzy expressed, is that my favorite part about the collective is the other things, all the non-art things. Like, hey, can I get your advice on this, or do you know someone that could help with this, or just like kind of the general, life advice kind of things, just as much as the specific art things. We do have studio visits and the opportunity to look at each other's work and get feedback if we want it. But it's just nice to know there are people out there that you can reach out to get, a resource or just insider feedback if you need it, whether you do or not. So we definitely have a very strong connection in that way. But we do meet every month to also check in, make sure everybody's on class. Yeah.
And so to your point about the studio visits, that's one of my favorite things, and I need to arrange more of them. But I really enjoy seeing how other artists work, what their process is, what they do when they first enter their studio, just kind of the whole vibe. And so I really enjoy that part of it too. It's just fascinating. I love watching other people paint, so anyhow, it's, the studio visits are great.
So we did have men, we have one man, and we did have men. I have to say, they're not so good at coming to the monthly meetings. That became a problem, so we had a rule, I think, that you can't miss, 3 or 4 a year or something, and that you could only miss 3 or 4 a year or something. It was pretty generous, but still it's not possible, so. But we encouraged to have 4 guys too. Our 1 guy was happy to have anyone. But one special thing with this group, because I know artists in town, I know artists out of town, and I'm affiliated with artists, lots of artists all the time, and the things that I'm doing, but to be in person, not on Zoom, and also multi-generational, has been great. I mean, Danny, who was an over here, she was instrumental in getting this started with the show when she went overseas. Izzy, there are other people that are younger voices, and as I get older, every given day, thank goodness, there's just so much, it's not just energy, but it's knowledge bases that are different, and it's really refreshing, and people probably do, But it's really refreshing to have these different perspectives, because when we're planning shows, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm thinking about this and what we're doing, and I'm telling you, all these voices from all these different perspectives, they say things I can't predict. And I love that. And it's great. I'm like, thank goodness. So everybody, Taylor, everybody in this group will say things I can't predict about things we're pretty familiar with. So that's awesome.
It is definitely a group too that has changed and has grown and evolved over the last 25 years. When I joined SRQ, I'm trying to remember how long ago, it was supposed to be 8 years ago, myself and Taylor Robinau, who's the co-director, we were one of 3 female members, and there were 16 male members, you know, so they were like, hey, we've got a female in the group, you know, so it is interesting just how the ebb and flow that is, you know, the artist life, the creative process life itself, you know, so it has been interesting, but all along, regardless of the members, what they're doing, age, gender, etc., I feel all have the same common goal, and so that's the unifying thing that keeps us going.
I might be familiar with some of those delinquent men that So obviously, you know, you have this great cohort here that you meet and you talk to each other, and in creating this show, you know, spoke back and forth, but essentially you're in the studio by yourself. So when you all first came in and saw the work together, what were your reactions? What did you think about the new legacy that you were putting forth?
When I first came in, it was so great to see everybody's work in this environment, because I haven't seen everybody's in person because we don't have that many shows. Everybody doesn't participate in every show, but it was just, I mean, not knowing who did what was really interesting, that I could try to figure out whose work, what, just based on what I know of the person, their style. So I love that it's the flow of all this, and seeing it all in person together. So that's just very cool to me, and, because I work alone with 2 dogs, and they give me a lot of input with some texture now and then. But it's nice to just get everybody else's input, and just to your last question, having resources. It's like, you know where to get this, or how did you do that? Because I'm not a ceramic artist, but I can use some ceramic techniques in my work. And so talking to everybody else, and how did you do that, I can then take their response and apply it to my work. So, and I just think it all was really great together. So it was, whoever did the sequencing did a really nice job laying it out. So thank you.
I was seated on the exhibitions committee to kind of help put this together, and I was working really closely with Christina. But, you know, a large group that meets once a month, it can kind of feel disconnected, right? And I've had my shared experience of trying to like herd cats per se, and I'm not saying that this is what that was like, but walking into the space for the first time and seeing everything in person, even though I was kind of following each individual pretty closely with what they're doing, the artists they were interpreting, but just seeing it in the white box format just kind of like elevates it. Because I think what we do is pretty casual, you know, and like pretty personal. And then all of a sudden you step into this really professional feeling, and it's pretty interesting.
And to me, it kind of pointed up the diverse work that's in here, kind of pointed up the diverse background of the artists who have come up with the Art Center of Sarasota too. That's really the first thing that struck me, is that it's all very different, but that it works.
It makes me very proud to be a member of SRQ, to look at the type of work, the level of professionalism, and the variety. I mean, amazing.
So I think it's interesting because a lot of this work is not like the work we normally do. So you probably, nobody would know that walking in, but we know that. And so at times it was a little bit of a difficult thing to try to figure out how to do this more difficult, I think, than we thought it would be. But I think my husband, who went to art school, so he has a background, he walked in and his takeaway was that it really all kind of resonated at kind of a similar professional level. And these are all marketing artists, but it's not necessarily the type of work we do, as they should say, you know, and so it's almost tempered or buffered a little bit. And we have this other show coming up at the Warren Art Center in December, which it'll be interesting to see. Might be a little too crazy because it's, you know, whether it will come together as well without our offering of this kind of concept that we had to do.
And the nature of the show, I think, was very interesting because it allowed for all of us to really break the mold, which was super exciting to walk in and say, like, what is going on? This is not what I'm used to seeing. But in that, like, kind of kick-started a whole new, like, fire inside me to create differently. And I think I can share that sentiment with quite a few of us.
Yeah, the other different thing about this show is that although we had the same cohesive theme, we were all referencing someone that impacted or was influential to Art Center Sarasota, we didn't have a cohesive theme as far as the visual. So in years past, we had, you know, it's hot or blue, whatever, you know, so all of the artists, even in different mediums and different styles, there was a color palette that was similar. There was a very strong theme that was seen in all of the work. So this is the biggest kind of assortment, you know, in that way. Personally, I walked out, oh wow, this looks better than I expected. I love it. The presentation goes a long way.
Well, you know, as you mentioned, Adrian, the diversity certainly speaks to our history at Art Center. So obviously you did a great job, and it's a very interesting show for sure. What do you think, or what do you hope your legacy artist might say in viewing your response to the piece?
I hope Carl would say, I want to take that home. I mean, that would be the ultimate compliment. But
I Carl.
Yeah, that would be the best.
It's such a difficult question. I never really think about what I want people to say. I certainly think about what I want them to feel. I was sharing earlier, I dropped off a piece to a client this morning, and I was sweating, you know, as I was getting there, like, are they gonna like it? Are they gonna like it? Are they gonna like it? So you never know how someone's gonna respond. I said to my husband, I hope he cries. I hope he cries when he sees it. He said, why would you want to? I just want like an response. So not, you know, but anything that's just a you know, some kind of, tactile is a hard way to put it with feeling, but you know, I just like to elicit a response, whatever it is. So I'll take what I can get.
Yeah. I think I just would really love if Sid gave it the time of day, right? I think what I enjoy most when I'm in a gallery setting with my work is kind of taking a seat back and seeing people chew on what I presented them. And you know, you have people that walk through a gallery quite quickly, right, with haste, and they want to get out of here, they don't want to be here any longer. But then you have people that really stand in front of it, and you want to know what they're thinking, but you know that they're feeling something. And so I would hope that Sid would stand in front of my work and kind of just chew on it for a few minutes.
I remember, I mean, I went to the door and I would say, let's have a drink. I love that. Yeah.
That's just the crush fucking.
That doesn't live up to his work.
For me, I think I would hope that Frank Colson would see the admiration and my appreciation of his work in mine. And I always like when people stand back and stare at it for a while. That would be awesome.
If John Chamberlain saw those, I would like it if he said, he pulled it off. Because I think, yeah, that's what I would like to hear. Or if his son is in Sarasota and he comes to see it, I would love his feedback on that. See if he thinks I will go with it.
Well, I know Sean enjoyed it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So, in Sarasota as well as the Art Center has a long and sort of up and down history with art and art making. You're part of the legacy of Sarasota art making. So how do you feel about that responsibility, and what advice might you give emerging artists in Sarasota?
I would tell people it's just paint. I mean, 99% of the time I work around and it took me years to not be afraid to do things, so I would just say, the fear aside, you should go this whole way. It takes a long time. So that would be my.
I would go with maintaining my practice. That's my responsibility. My responsibility is to maintain my practice as a professional artist and encourage new artists to just go for it. Just get the paint out there. Be a digital artist, be a fiber artist, whatever you feel. Just go for it.
A friend of mine, to Ellen's point, is a workshop instructor. She actually comes here, I think, sometimes. But my favorite line of hers is, "Nobody dies from a bad painting."
We were talking, as Lori mentioned a little bit before this talk here amongst ourselves, and the idea of legacy, and I don't know how, at least for me personally, that feels awkward. It's hard for me to look a lot into the future. I tend to really try to stay present or past, but the future, I don't know what's coming tomorrow. So for me, it is more about just sharing whatever insight I can give, and since I do teach at Ringling, I realize that for me it's more about just kind of passing along the tools. A lot of it is instruction, right? You're teaching a technique, a specific methodology in some ways, but for me as an instructor, the biggest thing is just the mindset. I talk a lot about creative endurance. I talk a lot about just pushing through, the fear or all the things. And one of my favorite quotes is Chuck Close, who says, "Amateurs wait for inspiration, and us artists, we just get to work." So.
I think you just need to own it. I'm just now stepping off the tails of my undergrad, and I think I entered this slump of imposter syndrome. It's like, oh, I have a degree now, but what does that mean? What does it mean to be an artist? And it got a lot easier the more I just kept saying it. Like, oh, I'm an artist, this is what I do. And it's one of those interesting career paths that, it's not this upward ladder linear scale that, you get to the next step, you have the next certifications. It's just, you gotta own it. And that has been my journey since my graduation. It's like, yeah, I'm an artist, and this is what I do. And I work with artists, and I wanna get your opinions, and feed into that,
I would tell them that Sarasota is the most amazing place to create art. I've heard other people say that about this coast of Florida, St. Pete and such, right in this building. But for me, it's athleisure. I can't imagine having the freedom that I have in my day-to-day life without the stress of snowstorms and bitter cold. And there's just so much more freedom to come and go, and the light is better. And it's just a great place to create art, and if you can do that here in Sarasota, it's a freaking blessing. So hope you enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, I know we have some eager members of our audience to get to some Q&A, but before we join them in, what is one message you hope the viewer walks away with from your piece, just as an artwork, not necessarily related to the legacy artist or anything else, just something you hope the viewer takes away from your artwork in the show?
That it's fun and whimsical, and it's not trying to say anything other than whatever somebody thinks. I mean, I think I titled one of them After Party because I put sequins and confetti. I mean, it's just like, it looked like what you'd sweep up after a party, and that's how I came up with the name. So I would just like people to think that it's fun, whimsical.
You nailed it, they're fun.
For me, I think the message is calm and balanced, so I guess that's what I was trying to get across.
I'd like them to see the success of the painting, which to me is just having that feeling of that time period around structures and architecture and things.
I was very excited creating this work. So I hope that they were just excited by the color and the vibrancy of it.
With my piece specifically, I was looking to create this idea of illusion, or you know, when I was walking and it was 115 degrees, and you know, it's like, where's the car? And because I saw Roland's work, lots of Western horses and cowboys and things like that, it just really like synced up well. Though his work was a bit more representational at that time before he leaned into abstraction, trying to kind of merge that, but visually just creating this idea of where, you know, where does the horizon begin or end, and where does the sun, what's the sun and the reflection of the sun, because it's such intense light in that space.
I saw one picture of somebody looking into my work. He was crouched down and he was looking at me, thank you. And I thought, that's the perfect reaction. I want somebody to look and say, what am I looking at? And I love to do augmented reality, and that's the one piece missing from this. And you would point your phone at the piece and things would move. That's how I do art a lot. But I want people to wonder what they're looking at.
Congratulations to all of you. It's a great show. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Any audience questions? Dee, I'm looking at you.
She was right.
Well, I was just kind of thinking, so you're thinking about the fact that they are all male, and why is that? And of course, you look back and you think about what was the representation at the time, who had access to representation. And I mean, I didn't even know that WCA, who I have a friend who was involved in WCA, was as old as it is. And there was a retrospective at the Ringling recently, and I was like, oh my God, how did I not know about this? You know, so it's not unusual, you know, it's just sort of like who got media coverage, you know? And yet it doesn't diminish the work at all. And yet it does make you want to dig, you know? Who else was out there that overlooked, you know?
And we did dig.
Yeah,
Not
I
as
bet you
much
did.
around, like a little
Listen, I got you
pixelated
with the
piece.
crush on Victor Lundy. Totally there.
Like, you know, looking at other people who in the group were looking, and they find like a pixelated little image that was like,
Yeah.
well, maybe we had to make something, you know, wasn't easy.
Yeah, like whose voices do we want to continue to elevate, right? And stepping into our legacy as women artists, right? How do we continue to boldly come forward and continue to create and inspire the next generation, set a new tone and precedent? I think is something that I choose and long and hope for, is what people look at me and say, yeah, she's standing by who she is as a person, and she's going to continue to create. And even if it is developing your own platform to be loud on, I think we have to be clear on that.
I have to say, when I look back, and because I met my husband in art school, I often ask him questions like these. We talk about these kind of things. I mean, I hope this is not going to come off badly, but
We're in a safe space.
you're ready. When I look at some work, painters, men painters, their work is more aggressive sometimes. There's an aggressive element to it, let's just say. Not always good aggressive, but it's there. Sometimes I feel like the paint is better, like more sensitive from a woman's palette, honestly, but it's not as aggressive. And so there's something about that aggression that I think gets attention. And I feel really ambitious in my work, like not ambitious that I want to be famous, but ambitious in trying to work the imagery I do and really push it. I am pushing myself aggressively in the studio. Will that mean anything to legacy? I don't know, but I'm certainly trying to push myself as a painter.
So I wonder, does your group, how do you create safe space among yourselves, or do you? And because you all seem really nice and really supportive of each other, and that's not always the case in art circles. So I'd like to hear about how your group fosters that kind of nice, considerate, respectful, safe attitude.
I think our raw selves are enough, and we come to it just with completely authentic. And when there's somebody around that doesn't, they tend to leave.
There's one that's kind of like a residence to the group, and like I'm in a dance group that I do for fun, and it's the same thing. It's kind of like people come try it out, if it's not for them, you don't see them the next time, or they don't stay around for a few years. So, and I mentioned our group, it is obviously, voluntary, to be a part here. So when people don't want to participate, and that's one of the challenges of leading a group that we do have a mission statement, but things, we all have personal interests and personal priorities within the groups and things we want to hone in on. And so as co-director, it is one of the challenges of, I'll meet with people and we just have real conversations like, hey, let's have lunch and what's going on, or even seeing you, or you have concerns, or maybe you're having but fortunately we haven't had many personal issues amongst each other. I do think it's because we have a common goal of creating art and supporting each other artistically, so the personal things, even if they exist, they're just not as bothersome, and we just kind of, I think, at least me personally, I just let them go. We're all very different. And I love that, because you also learn about people over time, and you learn, hey, yeah, that's interesting, I didn't know that about something, you get insight into how people are. So I think that's
And it's
great.
not competitive.
No.
So like, I think there's a pecking order, whether it's a tennis team or some art groups or theater groups, I don't know, other kinds of things. But there's definitely people in our group that are at different levels or different parts of their careers, or they're professional as an artist. But it never feels to me that it's competitive. And I think because when you take that out, that's a big thing to take off the table.
Right. And then I think just on a base level, the way that we meet. I mean, we sit around the table and we often have potlucks. We bring food and we talk, and we set aside time to get through the agenda of meeting items, and we have shows coming up. I know this. She has the agenda. And we have this show coming up and we have this going on, but we sit down and we connect personally too, which is also really important, right?
And we can disagree, we have disagreed. How many shows can we do? Can we put this on our schedule? I don't know. Some people, I'm like, yes, let's do it. Other people like, no.
I can't do more.
So we've got, but there's a ton of stuff going through that.
Yeah.
And like I said, unexpected responses.
Right.
And this isn't the whole group.
No.
So there are other members that, for whatever reason, didn't participate in this, so.
I think we also decided not to have 12, because that would have been too much. So this.
You mean in the show?
In the show.
Yes.
Right.
And
Not have 12 here. Danny, I remember Danny was like, we have to talk, we should have 4 or 5.
Yeah, because it is volunteer, you're never required to participate in a show or a party event or anything, it's if you want to be a part of it, you can join, and so then the people that join, tend to be more excited about it, so.
But it is juried in, so we're all at a certain stage of
that's
the
definitely
career, so that also helps too.
But then there's even though you don't have to participate, we want you to participate. If you're not, we're like, how can we get you to do this?
We got
we
12 out
want-
of 13.
Right,
shows,
which is
so that's
great,
pretty great.
so.
What's your next show?
Morian Art Center, it opens in January, I think January 6th. That's all good. And it's entitled Daydreams, and I think it's just kind of all of our own unique ways of chewing on that topic,
And it'll be up, I think, for 3 months.
Correct.
Long exhibition.
And
Check out our website, SARTQ.com.
And the curator is
Amanda Cooper.
right, and she's, we're giving her work and she's selecting it and deciding on the show and everything. So that'll be interesting how she decides to.
Didn't she curate
what
here
she's
once?
gonna do.
She's been a juror.
She curate here.
She's great.
Sure.
The space there is,
Yeah.
if you haven't been there, it's a beautiful space.
It's
I
a
hadn't
wonderful
been there in
space.
person, I was really excited to see, so.
Yeah.
Do
Do you struggle finding spaces in Sarasota for your shows?
I would say, for longer exhibits, we have never had issues with pop-ups and like short weekend or 2-day kind of shows. One big thing that Taylor and I wanted to start initiating when we kind of took the helm a few years ago is we came up with like, what are our big goals here? Longer shows, because what would happen is we'll spend months making work, and it just gets seen for a few days or whatever the case, just not having the exposure that we were hoping for. So that was a big thing, and then our quick party events, we just had specific things, and so we're really excited. The goal is to have shows always planned a year or more in advance because things do get filled, so we're on our way. We'll have 2 definitely set for next year. We're in the works of coordinating with a local group for an event, and then in the fall, more news to come. But we're really excited. I'm really excited about that.
It's a lot to pull together.
Yeah.
Student work.
The goal is 2 exhibitions a year, ideally, and then plus an event. So.
Well, congratulations on a wonderful show, and thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.